Far Cry 5 Hours of Darkness is a paid DLC for Far Cry 5, revolving around the horrors of the Vietnam War. Tasked with rescuing your comrades and escaping the smog-ridden war zone, you will mistakenly believe the fiery and intense introduction will reflect the gameplay. With just one main mission, you'll quickly realize that you sentenced yourself to completing pointless side missions as a desperate attempt to justify the money spent on this DLC. There is a limited story, but it's mostly given in the introduction, as there is not much real story progression following that. In a sentence, you play as Wendell Redler, a Hope County resident recounting his escape from Vietnamese territory. The gameplay has its own unique quirks separating it from the base game, but the ultimate premise of capturing enemy camps is essentially identical. If you play through the base game, then you'll already be familiar with the process of disabling alarms and blowing up the conveniently located explosive barrels. The stealth takedowns were a lot of fun and a bit gruesome, but outside of that, there wasn't much reason to perform them. I did appreciate the attempt to incentivize stealth, as there is a mechanic that awards perks, such as tagging adversaries quicker, but I was let down by its lack of influence and significance it had on the gameplay. At times, I would forget the mechanic even existed. It never got in my way, even if I wanted a loud, non-stealthy approach, but it certainly never influenced me to be more stealthy either. This isn't the only example of a poorly implemented feature. While the stealth perks weren't great, they were never an annoyance. The game mode limitation, on the other hand, was frustrating. I have no qualms with unlocking special game modes and difficulties after completing the main story. However, when there's only one difficulty that you must complete to unlock the others, you run into an issue of a forced playstyle. You must plan the normal difficulty to unlock the two other modes, an action movie-inspired mode where you can carry more weapons and cause mayhem, and a survival mode with less inventory space and health. Considering that you already have plentiful access to calling airstrikes upon your foes, the standard game mode was just too easy, especially since I never felt obligated to utilize the provided aerial bombardment, though admittedly, the explosions looked pretty darn cool. Given that the normal game mode was disappointingly bland and simple, and I had no options to give myself a challenge, I wasn't excited or motivated to replay the DLC on the survival mode. I would have much preferred had the survival mode been available from the start, with an insanely challenging difficulty unlocked after the story had been completed. My final complaint about the gameplay is not exclusive to this DLC. The AI companions, who are your ex-captive comrades, are absolutely useless, and will more often than not cause you problems and get in your way instead of assisting you. I would have much preferred to be immersed in the beautifully brutal war zone exploring on my own. The most redeeming part of this DLC was the environment. I thoroughly enjoyed the delightful combination of the luscious green Vietnamese countryside combined with the gray, war-torn buildings scattered across the map. The graphics were gorgeous, detailed, and crisp. I've heard of complaints that it's essentially a green filter on top of the base game. Although there is some truth to that, I can't complain too much since the base game already has beautiful visuals. I especially appreciated the ambient sounds and events, such as loud aircraft roaring ahead, complementing the map. Hours of Darkness is by no means atrocious, but unfortunately it turned out to be bland and generic. Had there been more to the gameplay than meaningless stealth perks and the base game formula, this DLC would have been a lot more enjoyable. It takes very little time to complete, especially if you're not a completionist looking to satisfy every side mission. Priced at $12 it's simply not worth it, unless you absolutely adore Far Cry 5 and will accept any extension to the game offered. Especially with Far Cry New Dawn already released, I cannot recommend this DLC to anybody, except the die-hard Far Cry 5 fans.